That night out on Route 93, it was one of those long, lonely hauls through the Nevada desert, where the road stretches so far into the dark that you start feeling like you're driving through nothingness. No lights, no towns, not even a gas station for miles. Just the sound of the engine humming and the desert wind scraping against the sides of my rig. It was about 2 in the morning when the CB radio crackled to life. I hadn't heard a voice in hours, so it made me jump a little. A man's voice came through, low and distorted, like he was whispering right into the mic. He said something like, "You see her too?" I grabbed the mic and asked what he meant, but there was just static. I brushed it off, figuring it was some bored driver messing around, and kept going. But then, maybe 10 minutes later, I saw someone standing on the shoulder of the road. It was a woman, or at least I thought it was. She was wearing this long white dress that looked out of place out there, like something from a wedding. Her hair was long, tangled, and blowing across her face. I slowed down a bit, thinking maybe she was in trouble, but something about the way she stood there made me uneasy. She wasn't waving for help. She was just facing the road, still. I drove past her, trying not to look directly, but as my headlights washed over her, I swear I saw her turn her head, slowly, to follow the truck. A few minutes later, the CB crackled again. The same voice. "She's walking now," he said. That's when my chest tightened a bit. I checked my mirrors, expecting to see nothing but empty asphalt behind me. But there she was, walking down the middle of the road. Her figure looked small in the distance, but what made my stomach twist was how steady her pace was. I was going at least 60, and she wasn't fading into the dark like she should have. She was just there. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was just fatigue, maybe a trick of the desert heat or the reflection from my own taillights. But every few minutes, I'd check again, and she was still there, closer each time. Then something thudded against the back of the trailer, a loud metallic bang that made my heart stop. It sounded like someone had jumped onto it. I slowed down, gripping the wheel tight enough to make my knuckles ache. Another thud, louder this time. I picked up the CB mic again and said, "Whoever's out there, stop messing around." The radio hissed for a few seconds. Then the same voice came back. Only this time, it sounded different. "Lower," he said. "Don't stop, she's already on." I didn't breathe for what felt like a full minute. I wanted to look in the mirrors again, but something in me wouldn't let me. My skin was crawling, and I could feel the hair on my arms stand up. Every instinct told me not to look, but I did. And what I saw made my heart drop into my stomach. She was crouched on the back of the trailer, her hands gripping the metal like claws, her white dress whipping in the wind. And even though we were still speeding down the highway, her face was turned straight toward me. I hit the gas. The truck roared louder than I'd ever heard it, but no matter how fast I went, she didn't move. She stayed clinging to the back of the trailer like she was part of it. The headlights flickered for a moment, and my stomach turned cold. I remember gripping the wheel so hard my palms started sweating, my breath coming out in shallow, panicked bursts. For a few seconds, I told myself maybe it was just some crazy hitchhiker, someone who'd climbed on when I stopped earlier that night to refuel. But that voice on the CB kept echoing in my head. "She's already on." The way he said it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like he knew her. I switched on the cab lights for a second, needing something, anything, to ground me. The glow filled the truck, and I saw my reflection in the windshield. My face was pale, eyes wide, almost unrecognizable. Then I heard it, something tapping on the back window of the cab. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. My throat went dry. There's no walkway behind the cab. No way for someone to reach that window unless they were hanging off the back of the truck. I stared straight ahead, afraid that if I turned around, I'd see her face pressed up against the glass. The tapping came again, this time closer. I slammed the brakes, the tires screaming against the asphalt. The trailer rattled violently behind me. I threw the truck into park and jumped out, my boots hitting the road with a heavy thud. The desert was dead silent, the air cold and dry. I walked to the back, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The beam of light cut across the trailer, revealing nothing but dust and the faint shimmer of sand. No footprints, no sign anyone had ever been there. I climbed up on the bumper to check the roof of the trailer, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Still nothing. That's when I noticed it. Handprints, dozens of them, smeared across the back doors. They were small, too small for an adult, and some of them were upside down, as if whoever made them had been hanging there. I stepped back, my hands trembling. The CB crackled again, but this time it wasn't a voice. It was just breathing. Slow, heavy breathing, like someone was right next to the speaker. Then I heard it, not from the radio, but from inside the trailer. The same breathing. I backed away, my mind racing. The sound grew louder, like someone or something was inside, inches from the doors. I could feel the vibration of it in the metal. I don't know what possessed me, but I reached for the handle. My fingers brushed against the cold steel and I froze, because right before I touched it, something hit the inside of the door so hard it made the entire truck shake. I stumbled backward, dropped the flashlight, and ran around to the cab. I locked the doors and just sat there, staring out into the dark. My chest was heaving, my skin clammy with sweat. The CB was still hissing quietly, but the breathing had stopped. For the next few minutes, I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I just waited, gripping the steering wheel like it could somehow protect me. And then, softly, almost gently, someone whispered through the radio, "I'm coming up." I froze. My whole body locked up, every muscle tight like I'd been turned to stone. The voice didn't sound angry. It wasn't shouting. It was calm, too calm, like whoever it was already knew what would happen next. My first instinct was to start the engine and floor it, but my hands wouldn't move. My heartbeat was so loud it drowned out everything else. I could hear it pounding in my ears like a drum, each thud sharper than the last. Then came the sound, footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps on the metal side rail of the truck. Each step creaked softly, moving toward the cab door. I could feel the vibration through the floor of the truck, light but steady. I forced myself to look in the side mirror. At first, I didn't see anything, just the faint shimmer of desert light on chrome. But then, a hand appeared, a pale hand, thin and small, gripping the edge of the door. I slammed the truck into drive and hit the gas so hard the tires screamed. The cab lurched forward, the trailer rattling wildly behind me. I didn't care if I tore the axles off, I just needed to get out of there. For a few seconds, I thought I'd shaken it off. The mirror showed nothing but darkness and dust trailing behind me. My breathing was fast and uneven, and I tried to calm down, telling myself it had to be a hallucination from exhaustion. I'd been driving too long. Maybe I'd fallen asleep for a second. Then the CB crackled again, but this time, it wasn't a voice, it was music, a faint, tinny lullaby, playing softly through the speaker. Something about it made my stomach twist. I'd heard that song before. It took me a few seconds to realize where. It was the same melody my daughter's old music box used to play before she passed away 2 years ago. I almost pulled the truck over again, but I couldn't. The thought of stopping felt worse than whatever was happening. I just kept driving, gripping the wheel until my knuckles went white. The lullaby kept playing for another minute, then faded into static. I remember whispering to myself, "It's not real. It's not real." That's when I felt the weight shift. The truck dipped slightly on the right side, like someone had climbed onto it again. I checked the mirrors, and my blood ran cold. There was a shape, just barely visible, crawling along the side of the trailer. It was moving fast, almost too fast, and heading straight toward the cab. I didn't think. I just slammed on the brakes, hard enough that everything in the cab flew forward. I heard something slam into the ground, outside. For a few seconds, there was silence again. No breathing, no movement, just the low hum of the idling engine. I gathered the courage to open the door, stepping down slowly. The desert air was freezing. I looked around the truck with my flashlight, sweeping the beam across the road. Nothing. No one. But then I saw the handprints again, fresh ones, along the passenger side door, smaller than before. A trail of them, leading up to the handle. I got back in and didn't stop driving until sunrise. When I finally pulled into a rest stop hours later, I checked the back of the trailer again. The handprints were gone, completely gone, like they'd never been there. But the CB radio still hissed softly, even though I'd unplugged it. And from the speaker, barely audible, came a whisper. "Next ride." Then silence. I quit driving freight a week later. I still take highways sometimes, and every now and then, I'll see a lone figure standing by the side of the road. I never slow down anymore. I don't look too long either, because I'm afraid that if I do, She might recognize me. It was sometime in late November, cold enough that the windows of my truck fogged from my breath. I'd been on the road for almost 12 hours, hauling a load of furniture through the Nevada desert. The sky was dark, no stars, no moon, just that kind of black that eats the light from your headlights. I remember pulling off onto a service road because my eyelids were getting heavy. There was no truck stop for miles, no gas station, just sand, brush, and an endless stretch of cracked pavement. I figured I'd take a quick nap in the cab before finishing the last 3 hours of the drive. I parked on the shoulder, turned off the engine, and the silence hit me harder than I expected. Out there, it's not the kind of quiet you get in a city. It's deeper, heavier. You start to hear things you normally wouldn't. The ticking of your own heartbeat, the soft creak of metal as the truck settles, the faint hiss of wind against the mirrors. I reclined the seat, wrapped my jacket tighter, and closed my eyes. For a while, everything was fine. Then I heard it, a soft tapping sound. At first, I thought it was a loose chain or something hitting the trailer in the wind. But the rhythm was too deliberate. Always in the same spot. It was coming from somewhere behind the cab. I sat there, listening, trying not to move. The tapping stopped after a minute or so, and I told myself it was nothing. Just metal cooling off, maybe a branch hitting the side. I laid back down, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. A few minutes later, I started hearing faint footsteps. Light, slow, crunching on gravel. My stomach twisted. I glanced at the mirrors, but all I could see was darkness. My hand hovered over the ignition, my pulse thudding in my throat. Then came the whisper, so soft that for a second, I thought I imagined it. A low voice, right outside the driver's side door. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like someone speaking under their breath, like they were trying not to wake me up. I froze, too scared to even breathe. My heart was hammering so hard it hurt. I stared at the door handle, expecting it to move, waiting for the window to fog from someone's breath on the other side. But it didn't. Nothing happened. Just silence again. After what felt like forever, I slowly reached over and turned the key. The headlights flicked on, cutting through the dark. There was no one there. The road was empty, not a single track on the dirt. Still, I couldn't shake that crawling feeling on the back of my neck, like someone was watching me. I checked the mirrors again, all clear. The tapping, the footsteps, the whisper, it could have all been my imagination. I was tired, maybe dozing without realizing it. That's what I told myself. So I put the truck back in gear and started driving again, just wanting to get back on the main road. The tires kicked up dust, and the radio flickered on with static for a moment before going quiet again. Then, about 10 minutes down the road, I noticed something in my mirror, a faint shape. It looked like a person, standing dead center in the lane behind me. I squinted, trying to see better, but the farther I went, the clearer it became. Whoever it was, they were facing me, and they didn't move. I kept my eyes on the rearview mirror, watching as the figure grew smaller in the distance, until the darkness swallowed it. My grip on the steering wheel was tight enough that my knuckles turned white. I told myself it had to be a trick of the light, maybe a signpost or something reflecting my headlights. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. That thing had shoulders, arms, and a head. It had been standing there, perfectly still, like it was waiting for me to look back. I drove faster, pushing the truck harder than I should have. The road was empty, no other cars for miles, just the sound of the tires humming against the cracked asphalt and the faint rattle of the cargo behind me. After a while, I started to calm down. The adrenaline faded, and my breathing evened out. The figure was gone, and the silence felt heavy, but normal again. Then my radio turned on by itself. A soft pop of static first, then a voice came through. It wasn't music or dispatch chatter. It was a whisper, faint, almost drowned in white noise. I leaned closer, trying to make it out. It was the same low tone I'd heard outside my window earlier, slow and calm, like someone talking just under their breath. I couldn't tell what they were saying, but it sounded like my name. That was enough to make my stomach drop. I reached for the dial, but before I could touch it, the whisper stopped. A few seconds later, the radio went completely silent again. I sat there gripping the wheel, every hair on my arm standing up. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then I noticed something else. In the reflection of the windshield, faint but visible, was a shape sitting in the sleeper cab behind me. I froze. The dashboard light barely illuminated the inside of the truck, but I could see the outline clearly. It looked like someone crouched low, their head tilted slightly to the side, just watching me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Every muscle in my body locked up, and my breathing went shallow. I told myself to stay calm, to just keep driving, but my mind was spinning. How could someone get inside? I hadn't stopped anywhere since the service road, and my doors had been locked. I knew they had been. I looked again, but the reflection was gone. Just empty darkness. I couldn't tell if I was relieved or terrified. Still, I pulled over at the first gas station I saw, some old, half-lit place off the highway with a single pump and flickering sign. I parked right under the light and climbed out, my legs shaky as hell. The air outside was freezing, but it felt good to breathe something that wasn't the stale air of the cab. I walked around to the back, flashlight in hand, and checked the trailer. Everything was locked tight. No signs of damage, no footprints, nothing. Then, for some reason, I looked up at the small vent window on the side of the cab. It was open, just barely, like it had been nudged from the inside. That's when I heard it again, a single tap coming from inside the cab. I shone my flashlight through the windshield, but there was no one there. The seats were empty, the curtains still drawn on the sleeper bed. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself I was tired, that my brain was playing tricks on me. But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Tucked into the crack of the driver's seat, just barely visible, was a tiny red light, a camera lens. At first, I just stared at it, frozen. That faint red glow blinked once, like it was recording. My chest tightened, and I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I stepped closer, shining the flashlight directly on it, and sure enough, it was a hidden camera, small, black, and wedged between the seat and the console where no one would ever notice. I reached in to pull it out, but as soon as my fingers touched it, the red light went dark. I yanked it free and stumbled backward out of the cab. My hands were shaking. The plastic casing was warm, almost hot, like it had been running for a while. That's when I heard the phone in my pocket buzz. Unknown number. I hesitated, staring at the screen. The call disconnected before I could answer. Then a notification popped up. A video file sent through an anonymous number. I opened it. It was footage from inside my truck. The angle was from that same hidden camera facing the driver's seat. In the clip, I was there, driving, my hands on the wheel, my eyes fixed on the road. The timestamp showed it was from less than an hour ago. But then, in the corner of the frame, the curtain behind me moved. Slowly, something, a hand, pale and thin, pulled it open. And behind it was that same figure I'd seen standing in the headlights earlier, its face hidden in the shadows, leaning forward until it was right behind my shoulder. I dropped the phone. It hit the pavement, the screen still glowing. I didn't pick it up. I just stood there, staring at my truck, half expecting that thing to crawl out. But nothing moved. I ran inside the gas station, told the attendant I thought someone had broken into my rig. He gave me a look like I was insane, but called the cops anyway. When they arrived, I told them everything. About the figure, the voice on the radio, the camera. They searched the truck front to back, found nothing. The camera was gone. My phone had shut off by the time they asked to see the video, and when I turned it back on, the message had vanished. No trace of it. They said I must have imagined it. Maybe I was overtired. I drive long routes, they said. Maybe my mind was playing tricks. I tried to believe that. I really did. But the next morning, when I was getting ready to leave, I noticed something scratched into the dust on the back of my trailer door. 4 words, "See you next drive." I wiped it off immediately, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. Even now, years later, I can't get behind the wheel without checking every inch of the cab first. And sometimes, when the road is quiet and the night feels too still, I swear I can hear that faint whisper again, right behind me. I've been a long-haul trucker for nearly 15 years, and I've seen a lot of weird things on the road. But this one still keeps me awake when I stop at motels or rest areas alone. It happened on a stretch of highway somewhere between Kansas and Colorado, middle of October. The kind of cold that makes your breath fog up inside the cab. I was hauling a late-night load, trying to make up time after a mechanical delay earlier in the day. The road was empty, except for the occasional pair of headlights miles behind me. My radio was off, my coffee was cold, and I had that strange feeling, like the night itself was pressing against the windows. At around 2 a.m, I saw her, a woman standing on the shoulder, waving one arm weakly like she needed help. My headlights caught the pale shimmer of her dress. It looked white, maybe light gray, and for a second, I thought it might have been some kind of prank or someone trying to flag me down for a ride. But when I slowed down, she didn't move, didn't take a step forward, just stood there, half turned toward the woods, hair hanging in front of her face. I rolled past her slow enough to look in the mirror. She was gone, not walking away, not running, just gone. I shook it off, told myself I was tired. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But the unease stuck. The road seemed darker after that. The hum of my engine, the faint rattle of the cargo in the trailer, it all sounded louder, like the silence outside was swallowing every other sound. About 20 minutes later, I saw her again. Same woman, same side of the road, same exact pose, like she'd been waiting there for me. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down this time. I just kept my eyes straight ahead, hands gripping the wheel tighter than ever. But when I checked the side mirror again, she was standing on the yellow line, right behind my trailer, not moving, just watching me drive away. By the time I reached the next rest stop, my palms were slick with sweat. I pulled over, turned off the engine, and sat there for a few minutes, just listening. The truck ticked as the metal cooled, and the highway wind whistled faintly through a gap in the window seal. Then I heard it, a light thump from the trailer, just one, like something had shifted inside. I told myself it was the cargo settling, but the sound came again, slower this time, heavier, thump. I tried to ignore it, but then came a soft, dragging sound, like someone's hand sliding across the trailer wall. I froze, every muscle in my body tight. The sound moved from the back of the trailer toward the cab, slow and deliberate. When it stopped, it was right behind the driver's seat. My breathing was shallow. I remember glancing at the passenger side mirror, half expecting to see her face pressed against the glass. But there was nothing, just the empty parking lot and a single flickering streetlight. I sat there for what felt like forever, clutching the steering wheel, listening to the quiet. Then, from behind the seat, I heard a whisper, just one word. Stop. I didn't move. I couldn't. The word echoed in my head long after it was spoken, though I couldn't even be sure I'd heard it out loud. Maybe it was just my brain replaying it, twisting it, trying to make sense of something impossible. But then I heard it again, clearer this time. Stop! It came from directly behind me. I snapped around, grabbing the flashlight from the cup holder. The beam swept across the sleeper compartment, just the mattress, my duffel bag, and the rumpled blanket. No one was there. No footprints, no movement, just the faint smell of cold air seeping in through the cracked window. I told myself I was overtired, that maybe I'd been hearing the wind through the seams or something shifting in the truck. I even laughed a little, that nervous, hollow kind of laugh that sounds more like someone gasping for air. Still, I decided to check the trailer, just to quiet the voice in my head. I grabbed my jacket and stepped out into the night. The air was sharp and silent, the kind of silence where you can hear your own heartbeat. The lot was empty except for one other truck parked near the rest stop bathrooms, its engine off and cab dark. I walked to the back of my trailer, boots crunching on gravel. My flashlight beam caught the padlock. It was still sealed. No signs of tampering. But as I stepped closer, I noticed something smeared just beneath the handle. It looked like fingerprints, dark, greasy smudges running downward, as if someone had grabbed the door with dirty hands. My stomach twisted. I backed up, scanning the area around me, but the lot was dead quiet. The only movement was the flickering of the lone streetlight near the bathrooms. Then my flashlight flickered once. I hit it a few times, but it stayed dead. The batteries had been full. I'd just used it hours earlier. That's when I heard it again, a faint tap from inside the trailer. Slow, rhythmic, like knuckles on metal. I froze in place, every nerve in my body screaming to move, but I couldn't take a step. The tapping stopped, replaced by something worse, a slow dragging sound, like fingernails scraping the inside of the steel door. I backed away until I hit the cab, trying to convince myself it was an animal, maybe something that got trapped inside during loading. But then something spoke. It wasn't clear at first, just a garbled, muffled noise. Then I heard the word again, stop. This time, it sounded like it was right on the other side of the door. I ran. I don't even remember unlocking the cab door, just slamming it shut behind me and starting the engine. My hands were shaking so bad I nearly dropped the keys. I didn't look in the mirrors. I didn't check the trailer. I just drove. Fast. Miles of dark highway stretched ahead, the lines on the road blurring from the speed and the adrenaline. I told myself I'd pull over at the next town, find a police station, report a possible intruder or vandalism. But before I could reach the next exit, my dashboard lights began to flicker. First, the radio cut out. Then the headlights dimmed for half a second, plunging me into near darkness. When they came back on, something in the rearview mirror caught my eye. For a split second, I saw movement in the sleeper compartment, something shifting under the blanket. I kept driving, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I didn't dare look again, but I could feel it, the weight of something, or someone, moving behind me. The air felt heavier, like the space in the cab had shrunk. I tried to tell myself it was just the blanket sliding around from the turns, or maybe the road vibrations. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The air smelled different now, stale like wet earth mixed with metal. I could even hear faint breathing, not mine, slow and uneven. "Who's there?" I said, my voice cracking halfway through. Silence. Then, from the back, a whisper so low I could barely make it out. "Stop!" That was it. I slammed the brakes, the truck screeching to a halt on the shoulder of the highway. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I turned, my eyes locked on the sleeper compartment. The blanket was still. The engine hummed quietly, the only sound in the world. For a long minute, I just stared, waiting for movement. Then the blanket twitched. I jumped out of the truck, slamming the door and running a few steps into the darkness. My breath came out in white clouds, my hands trembling so bad I dropped my phone trying to call for help. When I finally picked it up, the screen lit my face, and behind me, reflected faintly in the glass, I saw the cab door open. Someone was climbing out, but the way they moved wasn't right. Slow, jerky, almost like they were learning how to use their limbs. The light from my phone flickered, and for a second, I saw a face. It looked like mine. Same jawline, same eyes, same jacket. But the expression, it was wrong. The smile was too wide, like someone pretending to be human. Then the lights of an approaching semi washed over the road, and just like that, the figure vanished. When I looked back, the cab was empty. I stood there until the other trucker stopped to check if I was okay. I told him I'd seen someone break into my rig. We searched the cab together, the trailer too. Nothing. No footprints, no fingerprints, not even the greasy smudges I'd seen before. I ended up parking at a gas station for the rest of the night, leaving the engine running and the lights on. I didn't sleep. The next morning, when I finally checked the dash cam footage, everything from that night was gone. The file was corrupted, except for one short clip, a few seconds long. It showed me, sitting in the driver's seat. Only I wasn't moving. I was just staring at the camera, grinning. I don't remember doing that. And ever since that night, every time I turn on the truck, the dash cam light blinks on by itself, recording, even when I haven't plugged it in. That night on Highway 63, I've driven trucks for more than 15 years, and I've seen just about everything the road can throw at you. Drunk drivers, sudden storms, even deer leaping out of nowhere. But nothing prepared me for what happened that night. It was early November, close to midnight. The highway stretched out like a ribbon of darkness, cutting through the woods of northern Missouri. I was hauling a refrigerated trailer full of produce, taking it from Kansas City to St. Louis. Normally, I liked the quiet of night runs. Fewer cars, no way stations open, just me, the hum of the engine, and the faint crackle of the CB radio. But that night, the silence felt heavier. I remember the way the air outside seemed thicker than usual, like fog without the fog. My headlights barely cut through it. The radio was dead static. No truckers chatting, no weather updates. Just that low hiss. Around 12:30, I noticed a figure walking along the shoulder ahead of me. tall, thin, wearing what looked like a long coat. I slowed down, thinking maybe it was some stranded driver, but as my headlights hit him, I realized something was off. His clothes didn't look right, old-fashioned, like something from the 1940s. He didn't turn to look, didn't even flinch, just kept walking, stiff and slow. I rolled down my window a crack and called out, asking if he needed help. No response. Then, as I passed, he suddenly turned his head toward me. I only saw him for half a second, but I swear his face wasn't right. It looked pale, almost waxy, and his eyes were too dark, like there were no whites at all. My stomach dropped. I hit the gas, not looking back, telling myself it was just my imagination, or maybe a trick of the light. I'd been on the road too long, that's all. But a few miles later, I checked my mirrors and froze. There was someone sitting in the passenger seat of my truck. I could see the shape clearly, just a silhouette at first. My heart jumped into my throat, and I nearly swerved off the road. When I turned my head, the seat was empty. I told myself I was seeing things. Maybe it was the reflection of my jacket, maybe I was tired, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking, and every hair on my arm stood up. I pulled into the next rest stop just to calm down. It was one of those old ones. Dim lights, vending machines that looked like they hadn't worked in years, and a few trucks parked in the back. I parked near the edge, turned off the engine, and sat there in silence. That's when I heard it. A faint tapping sound. Not from outside, but from inside the cab, like fingernails gently brushing the back of my seat. My breath caught. I didn't move for a good 10 seconds. I slowly reached for the flashlight I keep near the console, turned, and shined it behind me. Nothing. Just the blankets and my cooler. I exhaled, trying to laugh it off. Probably something shifting from the drive. I grabbed a drink, turned the radio on again, and leaned back in the seat. That's when the tapping started again. But this time, it was coming from the sleeper compartment. It wasn't loud, but it was steady, deliberate. And then, a whisper. A man's voice, low, close, right behind the curtain. Keep driving. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The voice wasn't loud, but it had weight to it. Gravelly, calm, like whoever it belonged to had been sitting there the whole time, waiting for me to stop. I froze, staring at the curtain separating the driver's seat from the sleeper. The tapping stopped, but the silence that followed was worse. My heartbeat was pounding so hard, I could hear it in my ears. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind, or maybe the truck creaking, but the air inside the cab felt wrong. Heavy, cold. I finally found my voice and said, "Who's back there?" No answer. The flashlight in my hand was shaking, the beam flickering over the curtain. I took a deep breath and pulled it open fast. Nothing. Just my sleeping bag, my duffel, and the small window at the back, fogged over from the cold night air. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. I climbed into the sleeper, checked under the bunk, even opened the little closet. Empty. I sat there for a while, trying to steady my breathing. The clock on the dash read 12:47. When I finally got back into the driver's seat, I noticed something strange on the windshield. Right in the center of the glass, there was a faint handprint. Not from inside. The fingers were pointing inward, as if someone had pressed their hand against it from the outside. That was enough for me. I started the engine and pulled back onto the road, telling myself I'd just drive straight through until morning. The tires crunched over gravel, and the yellow glow of the rest stop faded in my mirrors. The highway was dead quiet again. No cars, no radio chatter, just the steady rumble of the engine. I rolled down the window, letting in the cold night air, hoping it would keep me awake. About 10 miles later, I saw headlights behind me, two small dots that grew closer, then stayed a fixed distance away. It looked like an old sedan. I didn't think much of it at first, but after 20 minutes, it was still there, keeping the same distance no matter how fast or slow I went. I switched lanes. The car switched lanes too. I slowed to 50. So did the car. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I flicked my headlights to signal the driver to pass, but the car just stayed there, about 50 feet back. Then the high beams came on. Blinding white light filled my mirrors. I couldn't see a thing behind me, just that harsh glare. I honked the horn, shouted out the window, but the car didn't move. It just stayed behind me, lights glaring. After a few minutes of that, I'd had enough. I took the next exit, a narrow road leading to a truck stop I knew. The Kao sedan followed. The exit curved through a stretch of forest, no lights anywhere. My stomach twisted as I glanced in the mirror. Only the headlights. No shape of the car, no outline. Just two blinding orbs floating in the dark. I hit the gas hard, trying to shake it. When I looked again, the lights were gone. No fade out, no turn, just gone. I pulled over, shaking, heart racing so fast it made me dizzy. I got out, grabbed my flashlight, and looked around. The road was empty, silent. The only sound was the wind moving through the trees. When I turned back toward the truck, I saw it. A man standing beside the passenger door. He was tall, wearing that same long coat I'd seen earlier. His head tilted slightly, like he was studying me. And then he smiled. That smile froze me where I stood. It wasn't wide or exaggerated, just a slow, knowing grin, like he'd been expecting me. I couldn't make out his face clearly under the truck's dim headlight glow, but his eyes caught the light in a way that made my stomach twist. They didn't look like eyes that reflected. They looked like they absorbed it. I shouted, told him to back off, but he didn't move. He just stood there, motionless, that smile never leaving his face. I took a step back toward the driver's side, fumbling for the door handle. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grab it. Then he spoke. The voice was the same one I'd heard earlier from the sleeper. Calm, almost polite. "You shouldn't have stopped." I jumped into the cab and slammed the door, locking it. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. I started the truck, threw it into gear, and peeled out of there, tires kicking gravel into the dark. For a while, I didn't look back. I just kept my eyes on the road, hands locked on the wheel. The road stretched on endlessly, surrounded by forest that swallowed the headlights. When I finally checked the mirrors, nothing. No car, no man, just the empty highway. I drove until sunrise before stopping again, this time at a crowded truck stop. I parked right under the lights, with other rigs on both sides. I sat there for a long time, watching people walk by, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. Maybe I'd fallen asleep at the wheel. Maybe I was just seeing things. But when I finally got out and walked around the truck, I stopped cold. On the passenger door, the same one he'd been standing next to, there were handprints, dozens of them, all smeared, like someone had been dragging their fingers down the metal. And each print was covered in what looked like dried mud, or something darker. I reported it to the truck stop security, but by the time they came out to look, the marks were gone, completely clean, like it had just been washed. They looked at me funny when I tried to explain, like I was overtired or making it up. That was 3 years ago. I don't drive nights anymore. I stick to daytime routes, no exceptions. But sometimes, when I'm parked on the side of a long, empty road, I still get that same uneasy feeling, like someone's watching me from the passenger seat. And a few weeks ago, while cleaning the inside of the truck, I found something under the passenger mat, a small folded piece of paper. It just said in tiny, shaky handwriting, "You stopped again." And the thing is, I haven't told anyone where I park. I was hauling a load of frozen meat through Nevada, somewhere between Tonopah and the middle of nowhere. The road stretched on forever. No lights, no cars, just my headlights cutting through the dark like two small knives. It was around 2 in the morning, the hour when the world feels empty, like you're the last person left alive. The desert air outside was freezing, but inside the cab, I kept the heater low. I liked the silence, usually. That night, though, it felt different, heavy, like the darkness outside wasn't just emptiness. It was watching. I'd been driving for maybe 9 hours straight when I decided to pull over. There was this old rest stop just off the highway. You know the kind, half-broken street lights flickering, vending machines long out of order, the air thick with that smell of dust and gasoline. I pulled in, parked next to an old RV that looked abandoned, and killed the engine. The hum faded, and suddenly the silence felt too big. I left the headlights on for a minute, just staring out at the cracked pavement ahead of me. Then I turned them off, and the darkness swallowed everything. No stars, no sound, nothing but the faint creak of the truck cooling off and the wind brushing against the metal. I climbed into the sleeper berth behind the seats, stretched out, and closed my eyes. My body was tired, but my mind wouldn't stop. You ever get that feeling when something feels wrong, but you can't explain why? Like your instincts are trying to scream at you, but your brain keeps saying it's nothing. That's what it felt like. I rolled over and tried to ignore it. I must have dozed off for a few minutes, but I woke up suddenly to this sound, like footsteps. Slow, careful, crunching against the gravel outside the truck. My heart started pounding instantly. I held my breath, listening. The steps stopped near the driver's door. Then nothing. Just silence again. I told myself it was probably the wind, or maybe a coyote wandering close by. But then I heard it. The faint sound of breathing, right outside the window. Deep, steady breaths. Too heavy to be an animal. Too human. I didn't move. I just stared into the dark, feeling my pulse hammering in my neck. The breathing went on for what felt like forever. Then I heard it. A light tap on the glass. Just one. That was enough. I slowly reached over and grabbed the flashlight I kept under the pillow. I clicked it on and pointed it toward the window. Nothing. Just my reflection staring back at me in the glass. But when I turned off the flashlight again, I could have sworn I saw movement in the dark, something shifting just beyond the edge of the window. And then, something tapped the glass again, 3 times this time. I froze completely. That's when I realized, whatever it wasn't trying to break in. It was trying to get my attention. I sat there for a while, gripping that flashlight like it was a weapon. My hands shaking so bad, I could hear the batteries rattling inside. I wanted to believe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, that I was half asleep, hearing the metal expand or the wind brushing branches against the glass. But there were no trees, nothing but desert. After a few minutes, the tapping stopped. I waited, straining my ears, but all I could hear was my own breathing. I finally worked up the nerve to peek out through the small curtain that separated the sleeper from the cab. The driver's seat was dimly lit by the glow of the dashboard lights. Everything looked normal. I stayed still, listening. Then something changed. There was a faint glow, like a light flickering somewhere outside. I leaned forward and saw it. Through the windshield, just barely visible past the side mirrors. A small flashlight beam sweeping slowly back and forth across the front of my truck. My throat went dry. Someone was out there. I slid forward quietly, trying not to make the suspension creak. I peered over the dashboard, keeping low. The flashlight beam was moving closer now, scanning across the hood, the grille, then up toward the windshield. I ducked out of sight, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The light stopped right at the driver's side window. I heard soft breathing again, muffled but close. Then, click, a camera flash went off. For a second, everything inside the truck turned white, and when my eyes adjusted, I felt this cold rush run through my chest. Someone had just taken a picture of me through the glass. I scrambled backward, tripping over the edge of the bunk. My flashlight hit the floor and rolled under the seat. I fumbled for my phone, but my hands were shaking so bad I could barely swipe the screen. No signal. Of course, middle of the desert. The flashlight outside went out, leaving me in complete darkness again. I didn't dare move. Every instinct I had was telling me to stay quiet. Minutes passed, maybe more. I lost track. I was just sitting there in the dark, barely breathing, when I heard it again, the sound of gravel crunching. But this time, it was moving away. I waited until I couldn't hear anything else before finally turning the truck back on. The dashboard lights came alive, and the sound of the engine gave me a bit of comfort. I pulled out fast, headlights on full, and got back onto the highway. I drove for a solid hour before I started to calm down. I kept checking the mirrors, half expecting to see headlights following me, but the road behind me stayed empty. I told myself it was over, just some creep messing around. But then, maybe 30 minutes later, I stopped at a small gas station to fill up. When I went inside to pay, I noticed a security camera monitor behind the counter showing the live feeds from outside. And there, in one of the screens, the feed from pump number 3, where my truck was parked, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Someone was standing by the passenger side door of my truck. He wasn't moving, just standing there, looking straight at the camera. And when I turned around to check, the lot outside was completely empty. I ran out of that gas station so fast, I nearly slipped on the tile. The cool night air hit me like a slap, and I scanned the lot, my eyes darting from pump to pump. There was no one there, just the hum of the lights and the faint buzz of insects. My truck sat exactly where I left it, engine still idling, exhaust drifting lazily into the night. I stood there for a few seconds, frozen, trying to convince myself that maybe the feed was old, maybe it was a glitch, maybe... Then I saw it. On the side mirror, just below the window, there was a greasy handprint. Not mine. Too big, too smudged. It looked fresh, like someone had just been standing there, pressing their hand against the glass. I climbed back into the cab, locked the doors, and started driving again. The road stretched on endlessly, the dark swallowing everything except what my headlights touched. I didn't even bother turning the radio on. The silence was heavy, pressing in on me. After about 20 minutes, I started feeling that uneasy pull again, like I wasn't alone. It's hard to explain, but every driver knows that feeling. You just know when someone's watching. I glanced at my rearview mirror and froze. There was movement in the reflection, something shifting in the sleeper behind me. For a second, I thought maybe it was the curtain swaying from the road vibration. But then I heard it, the sound of breathing, slow, steady, too close. I didn't turn around right away. I couldn't. My hands were gripping the wheel so tight that my knuckles went white. My heartbeat thundered in my chest, and I could feel sweat dripping down my back. Finally, I forced myself to look. The curtain was half open, just enough to see the dark shape of someone sitting on the bunk. Still, perfectly still. I slammed on the brakes, swerving onto the shoulder. Gravel sprayed across the road as I grabbed the flashlight and yanked open the curtain, but there was nothing. The bunk was empty. My duffel bag had been unzipped, my clothes tossed around, and there, sitting neatly on the pillow, was a Polaroid photo. It was a picture of me, asleep, taken from the foot of the bed. My mouth went dry. My mind was spinning. I threw the photo aside and jumped out of the truck, gasping for air like I was drowning. The desert stretched out on both sides, empty and silent. I don't remember much after that. I drove straight until morning, didn't stop once. When I finally reached a truck stop with people around, I parked and locked myself in the bathroom for almost an hour before I could breathe normally again. I called the company, told them someone had broken into my rig. They checked the footage from my dash cam and security cameras at the stops I'd made. You know what they found? Nothing. No one ever approached the truck. No one ever opened the doors. Not even once. But the Polaroid, they still have it in the company's file. Every now and then, I think about that night, especially when I'm parked on a dark stretch of highway and I catch my reflection in the side mirror. Sometimes, just for a second, I swear I see someone sitting behind me again, watching, waiting, and that's when I start the engine and keep driving, because I know if I stop, whoever they are, they'll finally catch up. I moved into a small apartment after breaking up with my ex. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was mine. And for the first time in a while, I actually felt safe. The building was old. You could hear the pipes groan at night and the floorboards creak even when no one was walking. But I got used to it. About a month after I moved in, weird little things started happening. I'd come home and notice my bedroom light was on, even though I was sure I'd turned it off. My toothbrush would be in a slightly different spot. Once, my TV remote was under my bed, even though I never put it there. I kept telling myself I was just being forgetful. I'd been stressed, not sleeping well, and honestly, I wanted to believe it was nothing. Then one night, I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I noticed something small and shiny on my bookshelf. It was behind a few books, like it had been wedged there. I leaned closer and my stomach dropped. It was a small, round lens. At first, I thought it was some kind of reflection, maybe a screw or a piece of glass. But when I pushed the books aside, I saw it, a tiny black camera, no bigger than my thumb, with a red light that blinked once before turning off. My hand started shaking. I picked it up, but it was warm, like it had been running recently. There was no brand name, no wires, just a tiny lens and a small slot for a memory card. I didn't know what to do. My first thought was to call the landlord, but it was past midnight. My second thought was that maybe my ex had planted it. We hadn't exactly ended on good terms, but the thing that scared me the most was that I'd been living there for weeks, changing clothes, sleeping, completely unaware. I didn't sleep that night. I kept every light on and sat on the couch with a kitchen knife beside me. Every small sound made me jump. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the pipes, the faint sound of footsteps from the unit above. But around 3 in the morning, I heard something different. A faint click. It came from the corner of the living room, near the air vent. I stood up slowly, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The sound came again, another click, like a tiny button being pressed. When I crouched down and shined my phone's flashlight toward the vent, I saw it. Another camera. This one was smaller, almost invisible behind the metal grill, but it was definitely there. And as the light hit it, the red indicator blinked once, like it had just been turned off. That was when I realized whoever had planted them wasn't just watching me before. They were watching me right now. I froze. Every instinct told me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The apartment suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were pressing in on me. I couldn't tell if the sound I heard next was real, or just my pulse, a faint shuffle from somewhere near the hallway. I turned off my phone's flashlight and held my breath. For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then another sound, a soft creak, like someone stepping on the loose board near the bathroom. I knew that sound. I'd heard it enough times to recognize it instantly. Someone was inside. I backed into the corner of the room, gripping the knife tighter. My mind was spinning. How long had they been here? Were they hiding somewhere, watching me every night? The creak came again, this time closer. I wanted to call the police, but my phone was still across the room on the table. The thought of reaching for it made my stomach twist. I was sure if I moved, whoever was there would know. Then, all at once, every light in the apartment flickered and went out. The sudden darkness hit like a wave. I could barely breathe. I tried to listen, straining for any sound, but all I could hear was the pounding in my chest. Then, in the darkness, a faint whirring started up somewhere behind me. It sounded mechanical, rhythmic, almost like a fan turning on. When my eyes adjusted a little, I realized what it was. Another hidden camera. It was inside the smoke detector on the ceiling, its lens rotating toward me. That's when I lost it. I grabbed my phone and ran out into the hallway barefoot. I didn't even stop to close the door. I went straight to my neighbor's door and started pounding on it. It took a minute, but a groggy middle-aged guy finally opened up. I told him someone had broken into my apartment, that there were cameras everywhere. He looked half asleep but followed me back to check, though part of me hoped he wouldn't. When we went back inside, the lights were back on. Everything looked normal. No cameras on the shelf, no lens in the vent. Even the smoke detector was just a smoke detector. He gave me this look like he thought I was losing it, but he stayed while I searched every inch of that place. Nothing. No hidden devices. No signs anyone had been inside. I could tell he didn't believe me, and honestly, I started to question myself too. Maybe I was just exhausted. Maybe stress was making me see things that weren't there. But before he left, he pointed at my living room window. The curtain was pulled back slightly, just enough to see outside, and on the glass, there was a faint, greasy smudge, like someone had pressed their forehead against it. The next morning, I went to a hardware store and bought a camera detector and a new lock. I tore through that apartment, checking every corner. I even pulled the vents off the walls. Nothing. For a while, I convinced myself it was all in my head. But then, about a week later, I got a notification on my phone, an alert from a motion sensor camera I'd set up facing my front door. It said there'd been movement in my living room while I was at work. I remember staring at the notification for a full minute, trying to convince myself it was some kind of glitch, maybe a shadow, or the light changing through the curtains. But the alert wouldn't stop blinking, so I opened the footage. At first, the video showed nothing but my empty living room. It was late afternoon, soft orange light spilling through the window. Then, about 10 seconds in, the camera adjusted focus, and I saw movement. Someone walked into frame. It was a man. He wasn't wearing a mask or anything, just an old gray hoodie pulled tight around his head. He moved slowly, like he'd done it 100 times before. He went straight to the shelf by the window and reached behind one of my books. That's when I realized something horrifying. He was retrieving a small black object, the same kind of camera I'd found before. He'd put it back. He looked directly into my security camera, tilted his head slightly, and smiled. Then he turned, walked down the hall, and the footage cut out. I called the police right away. They came, searched the place again, checked the locks, even dusted for prints. But there was nothing. No signs of forced entry. No evidence anyone had been there. The officers told me it was probably an old recording or a prank, but it wasn't. I know what I saw. That night, I packed a few things and stayed with a friend. I didn't go back for a week. When I finally did, the place felt different, colder somehow. I went straight to the living room to check my camera system. Every single one of my motion alerts had been erased, all except one. It was time-stamped 2 nights earlier, while I was still staying with my friend. The clip showed my apartment dark and quiet, but after about a minute, a faint sound broke the silence, the creak of the floorboard near the bathroom. Then, from the darkness, a voice, low, whispering, "I miss when you used to smile at the camera." The clip ended there. I moved out the next day. I don't know who that man was, or how long he'd been watching me, but sometimes, when I check my phone late at night, I still see strange notifications from devices I don't recognize. Cameras I don't remember installing. And every Halloween since then, around the same time, I get a single new alert. Motion detected in your living room. This happened about 2 years ago, and I still don't have an explanation for it. I was living alone in a small 1-bedroom apartment back then, trying to save money. It wasn't in the best part of town, but it was quiet and cheap, which was all I really cared about. The place always had this stillness to it, especially at night. You know, that kind of silence that makes your ears ring because it's too quiet? That's what it was like. I used to fall asleep with the TV on, just so there'd be some noise in the background. One weekend, I decided to rearrange my furniture a bit, just something to make the space feel new. While moving a bookshelf in my living room, I found something odd, wedged between the wall and the wood paneling. It was a small, round object, no bigger than a coin, with a tiny lens in the middle. At first, I thought it was some kind of screw or maybe a sensor, but when I picked it up, I realized it was a camera, a hidden camera. There was no brand name, no markings, nothing. Just a little black circle with a faint blinking light on the back, like it was still on. I froze for a good minute, staring at it in my hand. I could hear my heartbeat echoing in my ears. I lived alone. I never installed anything like this. I immediately started searching the rest of the apartment. I checked under furniture, behind curtains, inside air vents. The more I looked, the more unsettled I got. The feeling that someone had been in my home, watching me, made my stomach twist. When I didn't find any more, I convinced myself maybe the previous tenant installed it for some weird reason. Still, I threw it away and tried to forget about it. But that night, while I was lying in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about where that camera was pointed. It had been angled toward the couch, the spot where I usually sat for hours watching TV, sometimes even changing clothes if I was feeling lazy. It made me sick just thinking about it. Around 1 a.m., I heard a soft click sound from the living room. It wasn't loud, but in that silence, it might as well have been a gunshot. I sat up in bed and held my breath, listening. The sound didn't repeat. For a moment, I thought maybe it was just the house settling. Old buildings do that, right? But then I heard it again, this time followed by the faintest mechanical hum, like a tiny motor starting up. I slowly got out of bed and grabbed my phone for light. My hands were shaking so bad that the beam from the flashlight kept trembling on the walls. I stepped into the living room, and everything looked normal, until I noticed a small red light in the far corner, just above the TV stand. It was blinking. The red light was faint, almost hidden behind the clutter of the shelf, but once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I felt my throat tighten as I moved closer, every step heavier than the last. The room felt colder, like the air itself had changed. When I finally reached the shelf, I crouched down and found another small camera, almost identical to the first one. It was carefully tucked behind a framed photo, its lens angled toward the hallway leading to my bedroom. I swear my heart stopped for a moment. I yanked it out of the socket and dropped it on the floor. For a second, I just stared at it, breathing hard, trying to convince myself there had to be a normal explanation. Maybe the landlord had installed them years ago, maybe for security, but the lease never mentioned anything like that. Then I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The small light on the back of the camera was still blinking, not dead, not disconnected, active. Someone was watching in real time. I felt exposed in my own home. I covered the lens with my palm and stumbled back, trying to steady my breathing. My hands were slick with sweat. I dialed my landlord immediately, but of course, no one answered. It was almost 2 in the morning. I started checking every inch of the apartment again, tearing open cushions, unscrewing vent covers, even checking behind picture frames. My apartment looked like a crime scene by the time I was done. I found 3 more, one inside a smoke detector, one in the corner of the kitchen cabinet, and another under my coffee table, aimed straight at the couch. My chest was pounding so hard I could barely think straight. I felt like at any moment someone would burst through the door. I unplugged my Wi-Fi router, grabbed every device I could find, and threw the cameras into a drawer. Then I sat on the floor, back against the wall, phone clutched in my hand. I didn't even want to move. I kept imagining whoever was on the other side of those lenses, sitting somewhere, maybe just blocks away, watching me panic. And then, around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number, no text, just a video file. My stomach turned as I opened it. The clip was grainy, clearly taken from one of the cameras I'd found earlier. It showed me, sitting on my couch, watching TV. I was wearing the same hoodie I had on now, except the date in the corner of the footage said today. That didn't make sense. I'd been sitting on the floor for the past hour. I hadn't even turned on the TV all night. As I watched, the me in the video slowly turned my head and stared straight into the camera. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a dull thud, and I just sat there frozen, staring at it. My pulse was pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. The air felt thick, like it was pressing against my skin. I didn't want to look at the phone again. Every instinct told me not to, but I couldn't help it. I picked it up with shaking hands and replayed the clip. The video was only about 20 seconds long, but this time I noticed something I hadn't before. Behind the version of me on the screen, the door to my bedroom slowly creaked open, just a few inches, and then a shadow moved, not mine. Something darker, taller, like a figure just barely out of focus, standing in the frame of the doorway. The version of me on the screen didn't react at all. It was like I couldn't see it, but the camera could. I paused the video right there, staring at that shape. It almost looked human, but the proportions were wrong. The shoulders too narrow, the arms hanging too long. My hands started to tremble. I could feel goosebumps rising along my arms. I didn't want to stay another second in that apartment. I grabbed my keys, phone, and wallet and bolted for the door. But when I reached it, I stopped cold. The deadbolt was already unlocked. I was sure I'd locked it before going to bed. I pushed the door open as quietly as I could, listening for any sound behind me. The hallway outside was empty, dimly lit by the flickering bulb near the stairs. I stepped out, heart hammering in my chest, and closed the door behind me. That's when I heard it. A slow creak from inside the apartment. Then another, like footsteps, one after another, moving from the living room toward the door. I didn't wait. I ran down the stairs and out into the street, still in my hoodie and bare feet. I drove straight to my friend's house and stayed there until morning. When I came back the next day with the building manager and the police, the cameras were gone, every single one of them. The drawers I'd thrown them into were empty. The officers didn't find any signs of forced entry. No fingerprints, no damage, nothing. Just an apartment that looked like someone had searched it thoroughly and left. I moved out a week later. I still have that video on my phone, even though I've tried deleting it a dozen times. Somehow, it always comes back, like it's saved somewhere I can't reach. And every once in a while, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I can see that faint red blinking light again, this time just above my bed. I was renting a small studio apartment in the city, just trying to get by after a messy breakup. It wasn't anything fancy. One room, a kitchenette, and a single window that looked out onto an alleyway. The kind of place you rent when you just want to be left alone. At first, everything felt normal. I worked long shifts, came home late, ate dinner in front of the TV, and fell asleep to the sound of the traffic outside. But after a few weeks, little things started feeling off. The first thing I noticed was the light. Every night before bed, I'd turn off the lamp on my desk, but sometimes when I woke up, it was back on, not dimly glowing, fully lit. I thought maybe I was just tired and forgot to switch it off, but it kept happening. Then I started noticing my things weren't exactly where I left them. My phone charger, a book, even my toothbrush, just slightly moved. You know that gut feeling that tells you something's not right, but you can't prove it. That's what I felt. One night, I came home from work around midnight. I made some instant noodles, sat on the couch, and scrolled through my phone for a bit. That's when I noticed it, a small, blinking red light near the ceiling, right above the air vent. At first, I thought it was just some kind of sensor or smoke detector. But when I stood on the couch and got a closer look, my stomach dropped. It was a camera. A small black lens was tucked neatly into the vent, aimed directly at my couch, at me. I froze. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there, staring at it, my pulse thudding in my ears. The light blinked once, then went dark. I remember whispering to myself, "No way, no way." I climbed down and grabbed a chair to get a better look. The camera was wired into the vent, hidden so cleanly I never would have noticed it if it weren't for that light. I ripped it out. My hands were shaking so badly that I dropped it twice. When I looked closer, I saw a tiny logo on the back, something I didn't recognize. No buttons, no power switch, just that lens. I set it on the table, turned off all the lights, and sat in silence, listening. The apartment suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. I could hear every sound, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, the creak of the floorboards when I shifted. I wanted to believe it was leftover from the last tenant. Maybe they'd installed it for security or something. But deep down, I knew that didn't make sense. It had been on. Someone was watching. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept staring at the shadows in the corners, waiting for something to move. And around 2 a.m., I heard it, a faint click from inside the wall near the vent. Then another, and then the soft sound of static. The sound was quiet, but in that still room, it felt impossibly loud. It was coming from the same spot where I'd found the camera, behind the vent. I held my breath and listened. It wasn't random noise. It was rhythmic, like someone slowly adjusting a dial or switching something on and off. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam wobbled across the wall as my hands trembled. When I pointed it toward the vent, the clicking stopped. Everything went silent. I waited. Nothing. After a few seconds, I climbed onto the chair again and shined the light inside. There was just an empty space, no wires, no device, nothing but darkness. I could feel a faint draft of air brushing against my fingers. I tried to calm myself down. Maybe it was a loose screw or a piece of metal shifting. That made sense, right? But as I climbed down, I noticed something that didn't make sense at all. The camera I'd set on the table was gone. I stared at the empty spot for a long time, trying to convince myself I just misplaced it. I tore apart the couch cushions, checked the floor, even looked under the fridge. Nothing. It was just gone. That was the moment the fear really hit me. A deep, cold kind of fear that doesn't let you breathe. Someone had been in my apartment recently, maybe while I was standing on that chair. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? Hey, someone hid a camera in my vent and now it's missing? They'd think I was paranoid. So I did the next best thing. I set up my own camera. I had an old webcam I used for video calls, so I plugged it into my laptop, pointed it toward the vent, and left it recording while I tried to sleep. I barely dozed off. Every sound made me jump. The building creaked, cars passed by outside, and the pipes groaned every time someone used the water. Around 4 a.m., I finally drifted off. The next morning, the laptop was still on, and the file was there, a few hours of dark, uneventful footage. I almost deleted it, but curiosity got the better of me. I skipped through most of it until something made my stomach drop. Around 2:47 a.m., the camera flickered. The picture went fuzzy for a few seconds, then cleared, and there was movement. Someone was in the frame, not fully visible, just a shape near the vent, crouched low, facing the wall. The figure stayed completely still for a moment, then slowly turned its head toward the camera. I couldn't make out a face. It was just a pale blur with eyes that seemed too dark. And then the video cut to black. I stared at the screen for a long time, waiting for the video to start again. It didn't. The footage just ended there. Right after the thing, or person, looked straight into the lens. My chest tightened. I could feel my heartbeat thudding all the way up into my throat. I replayed the clip, frame by frame, hoping I'd see some kind of detail. A reflection, a clue, anything that would explain it. But the more I looked, the less it felt like a person. The way it moved wasn't right. Its head turned too slowly, too deliberately, like it knew exactly what it was doing. My hands were shaking. I unplugged the webcam and slammed my laptop shut. I was out of that apartment within an hour. I didn't even care about packing. I just stuffed a few things into a bag and drove to my brother's place across town. When I got there, I tried to show him the footage, but when we opened the file, it was gone. Not corrupted, not renamed. Gone. The folder was empty. He said maybe I'd fallen asleep and dreamed the whole thing, but I know what I saw. I know what I heard. A few days later, I went back with the building manager and a maintenance guy. I told them about the camera and the noises. They opened the vent, checked the wiring, and even removed part of the wall behind it. That's when they found it. A tiny black hole drilled through the plaster, leading into the next unit. And behind that wall, nothing. The apartment next door was completely empty. No furniture, no curtains, not even a working light fixture. It looked like no one had lived there in years. They told me maybe someone had been squatting there, watching me. But the locks on that unit were sealed. Dust covered everything. There were no footprints, no signs of life. I moved out the next day. But about a month later, I was scrolling through my social media feed late one night when I noticed a post that made my stomach drop. It was a short video clip, low quality, grainy, and shot from a high angle. It was me, sitting on my couch, eating noodles in that same apartment. The caption underneath just said, "You looked right at me." The account that posted it was deleted before I could report it. Now, every time I stay somewhere new, a hotel, a rental, even a friend's place, the first thing I do is check the vents, the outlets, the lights. I don't sleep until I'm sure. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still see that pale face turning toward the camera. And I can't help but wonder if someone, somewhere, is still watching. I had just moved into a small one-bedroom apartment after a bad breakup. It wasn't much, but it was cheap, and it felt like a good place to start over. The first few weeks were quiet, too quiet actually. The walls were thin enough that I could hear people talking in the hallway, yet I never heard a single sound from the units next to mine. No footsteps, no TVs, no plumbing noises, just silence. One night, I was sitting on my couch, eating instant noodles and scrolling through my phone, when I noticed something weird on the screen. My front camera was on. I must have accidentally tapped it, but the reflection in the tiny preview window caught my attention. Behind me, just above the TV stand, a tiny red light blinked once, then it disappeared. At first, I thought it was a reflection from outside, maybe a car light through the blinds. But when I turned off all the lights and looked again, I saw it, a faint red glow, pulsing softly from the top corner of the wall near the ceiling. It was too small to be a smoke detector, and the landlord hadn't mentioned any kind of security system. My chest tightened. I got up slowly, trying not to make a sound, and stood directly beneath it. From that angle, I could barely make out a small black circle tucked into the wall, no bigger than a coin. It looked exactly like a camera lens. I remember standing there for what felt like minutes, frozen, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself it was probably just a sensor or an old device someone forgot to remove. But that night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the floorboards, every faint hum from the fridge made me flinch. When I finally drifted off, I woke up an hour later to a sound, a soft click coming from the corner of the room where the light had been, like someone pressing a button. The next morning, I decided to investigate. I grabbed a chair and got a closer look. Sure enough, it was a camera, a tiny pinhole one, drilled right into the wall. But when I went to unscrew it, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The wires didn't lead into the apartment. They led out, toward the unit next door. That was the first time I realized I wasn't alone in that building. Even if I never heard anyone, I didn't confront anyone right away. Honestly, I didn't know what to do. My first instinct was to call the police, but I hesitated. What if it wasn't a camera? What if it was just some old wiring? The thought of looking stupid kept me from picking up the phone. So instead, I decided to gather proof. I went to the hardware store after work and bought a small step ladder and one of those cheap inspection mirrors. That night, I turned off all the lights again, stood on the ladder, and looked through the mirror into the hole. There was definitely a lens staring back at me. My hands started shaking. I could see the faint outline of a wire running through the plaster and disappearing toward the next unit. I couldn't tell if it was active, but something in my gut told me it was. I backed away slowly, the room suddenly feeling smaller, tighter. For the next few days, I couldn't relax. Every time I changed clothes, I felt like someone was watching. When I showered, I caught myself glancing at the vent above the mirror. When I ate dinner, I listened for that soft, clicking sound again. And every night, it came. Sometimes it sounded closer, like it had moved to another wall. I started keeping the TV on just for noise, but that didn't help. One night, I muted it, and that's when I heard it, breathing, not loud, but soft, steady, coming from behind the wall. I froze. I couldn't tell if it was my imagination or not. I held my breath, trying to match the rhythm, but it didn't sink. Whoever it was, they were right on the other side. The next morning, I went to the front desk of the apartment complex. The property manager looked confused when I asked about the neighbor next door. He said that unit was vacant. It had been for months. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and left. That night, I taped over every tiny hole, every vent, every outlet I could find. Then I turned off the lights and sat in bed, wide awake, staring into the darkness. For hours, nothing happened. Then, sometime past midnight, I heard a soft scraping sound, like nails dragging slowly along the wall right behind my bed. I whispered to myself, trying to stay calm. Maybe it was rats, I told myself. Just rats. But when I looked up, the blinking red light was back. Only this time, it wasn't in the corner near the TV. It was above the bed. I didn't move at first. I just lay there, staring at the tiny red light, my pulse thudding so hard I could feel it in my neck. My mouth went dry, and every breath felt like it echoed in the silence. The blinking wasn't steady anymore. It would pause for a few seconds, then flash twice, like someone was adjusting it. I slowly slid out of bed and reached for my phone. I turned on the flashlight, but before I could point it upward, the light disappeared. The wall went pitch black again. For a moment, there was nothing. No clicks, no scraping, just that heavy, suffocating quiet. Then, from inside the wall, I heard something shift, like someone dragging their hand slowly along the inside of the drywall. I ran. I didn't even bother putting on shoes. I grabbed my keys and bolted out of the apartment. I spent the night in my car, parked down the street, shaking every time a shadow passed by the windshield. The next morning, I went back with the manager. He unlocked the unit next door, the one he said was empty. The air inside was stale and cold, like no one had opened the windows in months. There were boxes stacked against the shared wall, old paint cans, tools, a broken chair. But behind the boxes, we found something that made my stomach twist. There was a hole cut into the drywall, lined up perfectly with the one in my room. And mounted right there, aimed directly into my apartment, was a small camera. Wires led to a recorder sitting on the floor, the kind you'd use for security footage. The manager looked pale. He swore he didn't know about it. He said the unit was supposed to be locked. The door had no signs of forced entry, no broken locks, nothing. We called the police, of course. They took the camera and the recorder, said they'd check for fingerprints. But a few days later, they told me something that still doesn't make sense. The footage on the recorder didn't show anything from my room, not even a second. It was hours of static with one short clip at the end, just a few seconds long. It showed the inside of my apartment at night. The timestamp was from the night I ran out. The video was dark, grainy, but you could see my bed. The sheets were messed up, the door wide open. And then, just before the clip ended, someone stepped into frame. They were tall, wearing what looked like a black hoodie. Their face wasn't visible. They walked up to the camera, leaned close, and whispered something I still can't make out. Then the screen went black. I moved out that same day. But sometimes, when I'm lying awake in a new apartment, I still feel it, that prickling sensation that someone's watching. I've checked every wall, every vent, every outlet. Still, every now and then, I swear I see it. That faint red blink, just for a second. And every time it happens, I turn off the lights and tell myself it's nothing. Because the truth is, I don't think I really want to know who's on the other side. I still don't really have an explanation for it. At the time, I was living alone in a small apartment. Nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom place in an older building with thin walls and weird plumbing noises that I'd gotten used to. I'd only been there for a few months when things started to feel off. It started small. I'd come home from work and notice things a little out of place. A cup I swore I'd left in the sink would be back on the counter. My phone charger would be plugged in at a different outlet. The kind of things that make you question your own memory. I blamed it on stress. I was working late hours, barely sleeping, and I figured I was just forgetful. But one night, I came home around midnight. The hallway lights were dim, flickering the way they sometimes did. And I remember feeling this strange heaviness in my chest. When I unlocked my door, I could swear I heard something, like a faint shuffle inside. But when I stepped in, the place was empty, silent. I checked every corner, every closet, nothing. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The air just felt different. It's hard to describe, like the room was holding its breath. I tried to ignore it. I made some tea, sat down on the couch, scrolled on my phone for a bit. That's when I noticed it. A tiny red light. It was faint, barely visible, blinking slowly in the dark near the ceiling. For a second, I thought it was a smoke detector. But then I realized I didn't have one in that corner. I stood up, moved closer, heart thudding harder with every step. It wasn't a smoke detector. It was a small, black device, no bigger than my thumb, tucked neatly into the corner of the wall where it met the ceiling. The red light blinked again, steady and deliberate. A camera. I froze. My first thought was that it was part of the building's security system, but that didn't make sense. It was inside my apartment, not in the hallway. I felt my throat tighten as my mind started to race. Who put it there? How long had it been recording? That night, I barely slept. I sat on the edge of my bed with all the lights on, staring at that tiny red blink. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd imagine someone watching me through that lens from somewhere else. And then, around 3 a.m., I heard it, a quiet clicking sound, like something adjusting. It was coming from the wall. The sound was faint, almost like a soft, mechanical tick. I held my breath, listening. It came again, a slow click, then silence. My first thought was that the camera was moving, adjusting its angle. I stood up, every muscle in my body stiff, and stared at that corner of the wall. The tiny red light blinked once more, steady and calm, like it didn't care that I was staring right at it. My heart was pounding so hard, I could feel it in my ears. I grabbed a chair and climbed up to get a better look. The camera was wedged in, so tight it almost looked built in. Tried to pull it out, but it wouldn't budge. It was like it was part of the wall itself. Then I noticed the wire, impossibly thin, running into a tiny crack that led behind the plaster. That's when I heard something else. A soft tap from the other side of the wall. I froze mid-step on the chair. It didn't sound like a pipe or the building settling. It sounded rhythmic, like knuckles, someone knocking slowly from inside the wall. I backed away fast, knocking the chair over. The sound stopped. My whole body went cold, my breathing shallow and shaky. I didn't know what to do. Call the police? Tell them what? That I found a hidden camera and now my wall was tapping at me? I decided to grab my keys and go stay at a friend's place. I didn't even bother packing clothes. I just wanted to get out. But as I grabbed my jacket from the hook by the door, I saw something that made my stomach twist. There was another red light. This one was lower, near the vent by the floor. I crouched down and saw it blinking slowly inside the metal slats. Another camera. I wanted to throw up. I started scanning the room, every shadow, every corner. They were everywhere. Tiny black dots in places I'd never thought to look. Above the fridge, behind the lamp, even inside the clock on my nightstand. The thought hit me all at once. Someone had been watching me for weeks, maybe months. Every shower, every night I slept, every moment I thought I was alone. I felt sick, dizzy, and desperate to leave. But as I reached for the doorknob, I noticed it. The faintest sound of static coming from my TV, even though it was off. Then the screen flickered, and my living room appeared on it, live. From above, from the same corner where the first camera had been. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the fallen chair. The TV was showing my living room from a high angle, exactly like the camera's view. My own body was on the screen, frozen, staring in disbelief. It was streaming in real time. I could see the slight tremor in my hands. I turned toward the camera in the corner. The red light blinked again, slower this time, almost like it was breathing. I reached for the remote, but before I could even touch it, the image on the screen shifted. It wasn't just the living room anymore. The feed changed to another view, my bedroom, the same messy bed I hadn't made that morning. Then it switched again, my bathroom, the kitchen, every single room in my apartment. And then, finally, the view changed one more time. It showed the hallway outside my front door. Someone was standing there. The figure was still at first, just a tall silhouette, back turned toward the camera. But then it moved closer to the lens, slowly, almost curiously. I couldn't see a face, only the outline of a hooded head. My pulse was pounding so loud I could barely hear my own breathing. The person turned toward my door. I heard it then. Soft. Footsteps on the other side. My body froze completely. I didn't even dare to breathe. The footsteps stopped right outside. For several long seconds, nothing happened. I stared at the door, waiting for a knock, for the sound of the handle turning, for something. But instead, the screen flickered again. Now it showed my living room, the same shot as before, except I wasn't in it anymore. I blinked, confused, then realized what that meant. The live feed wasn't showing me. It was showing the room as it was being seen right now, empty. And then I heard a whisper behind me. It was faint, right next to my ear. "Don't move." I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The air around me felt heavier, colder. I could hear breathing now, slow and steady. Not mine. I don't remember much after that. I think I blacked out. When I came to, it was morning. The TV was off. The cameras were gone, every single one of them. The corners of the walls were smooth again, like they'd never been there in the first place. I called the police, of course. They searched the place, but they didn't find anything. No holes, no wires, no recording devices. They said maybe I'd been hallucinating from lack of sleep. But I know what I saw, and sometimes, late at night when the apartment is quiet, I swear I can still hear that faint click from the corner of the room. And when I do, I make sure to smile, because if someone is still watching me, I want them to know I know.